On a steep volcanic slope in the Canary Islands, a man stands at the edge of a drop, holding a wooden pole several meters long. Then he jumps. For a moment, there is no solid support beneath him. The metal tip of the pole has not even reached the ground. Man and pole are descending together. Then the tip finds the rock below. His body closes around the pole. His hands begin to slide, and what looked like an uncontrolled fall becomes a controlled descent. This is not pole vaulting, and it was not invented as an extreme sport. It is part of a centuries-old Canarian tradition known as Salto del Pastor, the shepherd's leap. And to understand why anyone would learn to move through a landscape like this, we first have to understand the landscape itself. The Canary Islands rise abruptly from the Atlantic Ocean. Their volcanic terrain is filled with ravines, ridges, steep slopes, and rocky drops. For generations of shepherds, this was not scenery, it was a workplace. Goats and sheep searching for food or water could move into difficult terrain. A shepherd might need to reach an animal that was injured or separated from the herd, cross a steep slope, descend into a ravine, or simply find a faster route through the mountains. Walking around every obstacle could mean a long detour. So shepherds used a remarkably simple tool to transform the way they moved through the landscape, a long wooden pole with a pointed end capable of gripping the ground. It could provide support while walking, help with climbing, and in skilled hands, allow a shepherd to descend terrain that would otherwise be extremely difficult to negotiate quickly. The spectacular leap was therefore only one part of something much more practical, a system of movement adapted to the geography of the islands. There is no single Canarian name for the pole. In La Palma, it is commonly called a lanza, in Gran Canaria, a garrote. Other islands use names including Astia, Asta, and Lata. Even its dimensions change with the landscape. Historical and official descriptions place these tools at roughly 2 to 4 meters long. Shorter poles could be used in gentler terrain. In more rugged areas, they could reach 3 or 4 meters. The construction looks simple, but its details matter. The main shaft is wood, selected for a combination of strength, flexibility, and relatively low weight. It becomes thicker toward the bottom and narrower toward the top. At its lower end is the regatón, the pointed component that makes contact with the ground. Leather can protect the area where wood and metal meet, while some poles also carry a small metal fitting at the upper end. This was not simply a stick that happened to be long enough. Its proportions, materials, and construction developed around the job it had to perform. So how can someone descend several meters without simply crashing into the ground? The answer is not one single trick. When the regatón is already firmly positioned below, the pole provides a stable line along which the practitioner can descend. The body stays close to the pole. The hands slide while applying controlled pressure. The legs can also press against it, and friction between the pole and different parts of the body helps regulate the descent. At the bottom, bent legs help soften the final contact with the ground. Experienced practitioners can position their bodies behind the pole or to one side of it depending on the technique and terrain. The important point is that the pole does not somehow eliminate gravity. The practitioner is controlling how that gravitational descent takes place, using support, friction, body position, and years of learned coordination. And that distinction becomes much more important when the pole cannot be planted before the jump begins. One of the most striking techniques is known as regatón muerto. In a more straightforward descent, the metal tip is already firmly supported below before the practitioner commits to the jump. With regatón muerto, it is not. The practitioner begins the descent before the lower end of the pole has been planted on the ground. That changes everything. The pole must be controlled during the movement. The regatón must establish contact below, and the practitioner must then control the remaining descent and arrive as softly as possible. This is an advanced technique. The Canary Islands Federation, responsible for preserving the tradition, emphasizes the need for experience, confidence, and a highly developed ability to break, and the distances involved can be remarkable. Some regatón muerto jumps exceed the length of the pole itself. The Federation records exceptional examples reaching twice, and in unusual circumstances even 3 times, the length of the tool. But those are exceptional feats. not the definition of everyday Salto del Pastor. The tradition includes much quieter movements as well, using the pole as support, descending while keeping the feet against the rock, climbing, moving from one foothold to another, and crossing difficult terrain. The spectacular jump is only the most dramatic expression of a much larger vocabulary of movement. Spend enough of your life using a tool like this, and something interesting happens. Practical skill can become play. Historical and official descriptions of Salto del Pastor record games, challenges and demonstrations performed with the pole even before its traditional pastoral function disappeared. There are precision jumps and height challenges, as well as named skills and games, such as hacer la bandera, making the flag, pasarse la lanza, moler con el garrote, and la vuelta del pastor. Expert practitioners can combine movements, change their relationship to the pole, and perform positions that seem almost acrobatic. A person may appear horizontal beside a nearly vertical pole, inverted above a drop, or moving around the shaft before controlling the final descent. Not every spectacular movement needs to have been useful for catching a goat. Some became demonstrations of jeito, the difficult-to-translate idea of having the feel, mastery, and practical skill required to make the tool do what you want. The working instrument had also become a way of demonstrating just how completely someone had learned to control it. The exact origin of Salto del Pastor cannot be reduced to a single date or inventor. Its roots are associated with the indigenous societies that inhabited the Canary Islands before European colonization. Historical accounts describe the early islanders using wooden poles and moving with remarkable agility across the difficult terrain. After colonization, the practice continued. Over the centuries, people in rural communities kept using long poles to negotiate the island's geography. But shepherds became especially important in preserving the knowledge. That is why the tradition eventually became known as Salto del Pastor. The connection with the indigenous past is an important part of its history, but it should be treated carefully. The surviving evidence does not allow us to reconstruct every technique exactly as it may have been performed centuries ago. What we can trace is remarkable continuity, a landscape, a type of tool, a practical need, and a body of knowledge that survived through generations. During the 20th century, the everyday need for these poles gradually declined. Changes in rural life and the economy meant fewer people needed to cross mountains and ravines this way as part of their work, for a tradition built around practical necessity that could have been the end. Instead, something else happened. Beginning especially in the 1990s, people interested in Canarian traditions sought out experienced shepherds, researched their knowledge, and learned how the poles had been used. Groups, clubs, and jurias formed to preserve and transmit the practice. Today, Salto del Pastor survives as a non-competitive federated traditional activity. Practitioners organize routes through the landscape, gatherings, demonstrations, workshops, and introductory courses. New people still learn how to use the same kind of tool. New poles are still made. And in 2018, the government of the Canary Islands formally declared Salto del Pastor a bien de interés cultural, a protected expression of the island's traditional cultural heritage. The shepherd no longer needs this pole in the way generations before him did, but the knowledge contained in it has survived. A simple piece of wood and metal became something larger, a record of how human beings learned to adapt their bodies, their tools, and their skills to one of the most difficult landscapes they called home. If you enjoyed discovering how Canary Island shepherds learned to move through cliffs and ravines with little more than a wooden pole, there are many more extraordinary traditions and ingenious solutions to everyday problems hidden throughout human history. Subscribe to Growing Curiosity and join us as we keep exploring the ideas, places, and skills that reveal just how inventive people can be.